To the session. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking time to come here today for your budget hearing. Couple things we need to take care of before we get started. We will be recording today's hearing. We're going to be using the Zoom conferencing format to do that. As part of the hearing, some of our committee and board members are participating in the Zoom as well. We have Diane Conley and Dana Wayne attending right now via Zoom. Mary Salvatore may pop in and out. She had a conflict, but those three members of the committees and board will be participating. As well as some members who've contacted us. We were contacted by 5 members to participate via Zoom. Currently, I'm sorry, Diana Fontanez is also a member online as well. And it looks like Dudley Ott is getting ready to add on. Daryl Willoughby and Nancy Jackson are attending online as well. So here are some guidelines for what we're going to be going through today. As stated above, we're going to be recording the hearing. A copy of this recording will be made available to all property owners through online methods, media methods, including our website, Facebook page, and YouTube site. By choosing to participate in the hearing, you're giving your consent and approval for your voice, name, and images, if provided, to be recorded and redistributed by the association through these media methods. The association is not responsible for any reposting, copying, and distribution of this recording through other media sources. The association is also not responsible for comments made by others who view this recording. If you would prefer to submit any comments through private methods, we advise property owners to use the association Speak Up Sheet program to submit questions, comments, and suggestions. A response will be provided if it is requested. For those attending today, management, along with members of the board, finance committee, and facilities planning committee, will present the budget information and are available to answer questions and provide additional information about our 2023-24 fiscal year budget. Members in attendance are encouraged to ask questions during the presentation, so don't hesitate to put your hand up and ask a question as we're going through. We have a good amount of representation from finance, facilities, and the board present today, and we have a few guests as well. Charlie has the sign-in sheet, so if you have not signed in, please make sure you do. Following the hearing, at the conclusion of the PowerPoint presentation, we will open the floor for additional questions, comments, and suggestions. So again, interrupt me during the presentation, and then we'll also have some time to discuss issues at the end. Following the hearing, the Finance and Facilities Planning Committee will be meeting to hold follow-up meetings and make recommendations to either affirm what's been presented or amend what's been presented to you today. This will go before the board at their December board meeting for approval on the assessment level. And the budget will continue after the first year to finalize the line item details right up till March. Copies of the budget hearing packet are provided on our website in the password protected portion of the website. You can also see them in the December issue of the Woodhaven News. So is there anybody that's got any questions or comments before we get started? Really quiet. How about online? Everybody good? Just give me a thumbs up. Can hear everything fine? Welcome aboard, Dudley. All right. So for those of you online, if you have a copy of the packet that was available, you should have that in front of you. We have a PowerPoint that's going to be displayed on the screen. That will be used to kind of walk through this process. So let's turn to page 1 and we'll get started. Print keeps getting smaller. All right, Woodhaven's management, finance, and facilities planning committees have been meeting for the last couple months. We've reached our point in the process where we're ready to present the budget information to the membership, answer questions, provide clarification on some of the plans and objectives. At the beginning of this process, moving down in the middle of the section, the board of directors met and discussed some objectives to start the budget process with. Generally, the objective for operations was to maintain and enhance service levels. That was a general objective. Basically, what that means is we're going to try to operate with about the same number of staff doing the same types of amenities and activities and services that we provide for the owners. When we started the budget process in September, we were projecting an assessment level of 1,485 for lots with sewer services and 1,365 for lots without sewer services. As you'll see in the presentation today, it's slightly higher based on some things that are impacting us. We did anticipate inflationary impacts to push the number higher. We also have a surplus from 2021-22 that will be reviewed and considered. And then we also take a good look at our projections as part of this process. Some of the other things we talked about at the beginning of this was the wage and compensation plan. There were some wage scale increases and some concerns there with some of our full-time positions. We were recommending an organizational structure change to the board at that time as well. And then there were a couple of changes, actually 3 areas of the budget where we were asking for consideration in administration, recreation, and service center. The board also had some conversations because this year is the first year of a new 3-year cycle in our assessment plan. So this is the first year in the last 2 that we've had an increase. And so there was some discussion about ways to change how the revenue is supported in the organization and maybe considering some fee-based revenue streams. On the capital project side and the reserve funds, one of the main areas that we're currently working on is we're working on some network and software improvements to our main member database system at the office. We do expect that that's going to carry over and impact this year's budget. There were a number of projects presented to the Facilities Planning Committee through the summer months. The Facilities Planning Committee meets in May, starts in May, meets every month right up until now. And they've been reviewing projects each month from May through September. And then that information was presented to the board. It includes several additional new project recommendations. Our main objective with our reserve fund is to provide for our current and future projects. And so when we do put this together, we use a relatively complex calculation to project our reserve balance percentages. But our main goal is to stay above a 30% funded reserve. We've been using this standard for a really long time, and I think it works well for the organization. And that was what was outlined and presented to the board at the beginning of this process. Can't remember what's my next slide. Let's see. Not quite ready for that yet. Okay. Since the budget workshop, so the meeting process for our committees, they start in September. As I said, facilities actually starts in May, works all summer. In September, the budget was introduced to the finance committee. There were some recommendations made. We held budget workshops with all the department managers and the critical committee and board members and participation. And the recommendation was put forth. After that was done, or during that presentation, we talked about one of the fee-based options that we were going to consider, which was the Woodhaven News. So there's been some discussion that's taken place since that time. So on September 30th, staff presented information about the Woodhaven News. Staff members were directed to prepare a Woodhaven News budget based on some of those options that were presented to the committee. We met with the board of directors on November 2nd and reviewed that information, provided several different options, and have made a recommendation that's included in this budget presentation. The discussion included consideration and concerns with how the recommendations would adversely impact services and activities here at Woodhaven. The ultimate recommendation was to maintain the basis of how we are currently doing our Woodhaven News. It will be funded as part of your assessment. There will not be a separate fee. We'll continue to look into that and evaluate that. So the budget information that's been provided today is based on everything that the committees and the board looked at the workshop. There was further discussion on the Woodhaven News, and when we get to that section, I'm going to have Nikki come up and kind of talk a little bit about some of the different changes that are going to take place in the Woodhaven News next year. In the end, it's recommended, it was approved by the board of directors at their November 2nd board meeting, that we are authorized to present you with a budget that is based on assessments of $1,495 for lots with sewers and $1,375 for lots without sewer. So when you look at this schedule and you read it in the report, the breakdown of it, the increase in the operating assessments is about $10 higher than what we had projected going into this budget process. The lot fund assessment was reduced by $1. Water and sewer assessments actually stayed the same at $96 for the sewer lots, but that's a $2 decrease off of what was previously projected. And then the rescheduling and shifting of projects changed the allocations for the association reserve from 139 to 173. Water and sewer reserves from 60 to 56. New projects from 105 down to 78. And then our debt service fund for 62. That represents your 1,495 for sewer lots. You have a slightly different variation of the allocations for the non-sewer lots. 162 for the association reserve, 28 for the water and sewer reserves, and 76 for the new projects, 31 for debt services. So that is the current allocations that are presented with this budget. That is what will be presented to the board, barring any changes or adjustments on the December 13th board meeting for approval. Any questions? Okay, there's a number of things that we try to consolidate and summarize for you. And in this schedule is our operating budget. Before I get there, your assessment breakdown's the same. You can pay in full by March with a $30 discount for sewer lots, $25 discount for non-sewer lots, or you can pay in 3 installments. Due dates March, July, it'll be March, May, and July. So those schedules stay the same. The numbers are adjusted based on the projected assessment levels. Our operating budget summary report. We do a lot of consolidation in this report. What I do want to let everybody know is that if you have any questions or if you need more information, you can contact the office. You can stop in and you can see all the detailed information. But we have 3 sets of the detailed listings for the budget, department budgets, for your project list, your reserve plans up here for anybody who wants to view them at the present time. Those things will continue to be adjusted until we finalize the budget details in March. So we'll keep that in mind, but those are all up here in the basis for which we produce this information. So in this schedule, as you can see, you have your income at the top. The items highlighted in blue represent the consolidation of our subsidiary income, and the consolidated results of the utility operations are in that blue highlighted section. Below, we break down some of the expenditure categories for you. And then there's a net difference between the income generated from the various other sources minus the expenses to determine what the net assessment is that's needed. for operating costs. In the red section, we show that in a gross total. We also show that in a percentage total. And then in the green section, we break that down into a per lot total so that you can see that. This is where the operating assessment is projected for the operating fund and the lot fund concluded together. So the operating piece is $1,023 and $7 for the lot fund. So you have a total operating assessment in this presentation of $1,030 per lot. That will be applied to both sewered and non-sewered lots at that rate. The next chart is on the top of page 4, and it is your subsidiary and utility fund breakdown. It's the same similar breakout as the summary report that we just talked about for operating, only for subsidiary operations, which is General Store Service Center, which is Woody Inc. and Woodhaven Lakes Realty are the subsidiary operations, and then you have the utility fund as its own separate column. The blue highlights at the bottom represent those consolidated totals. If you tie those back to the other report, you'll see that they flow into our operating assessment in that manner. Income numbers are at the top, expense categories are shown at the bottom, net results at the very bottom. So you see Woody Inc. And Woodhaven Lakes Realty, 133,402, and utility fund 204,457. Yes, Laura.
Just a question. So on page 3, you've got the per lot assessment by department, and then the total is 1,030 for operating income or for operating expenses.
Right.
But then on this page 2, the operating fund is 1,023.
Plus the lot fund.
Plus
that. Yeah.
Oh, plus the lot.
It's shown on that one.
Okay.
So for those online,
All right.
correct, you got it? Okay, so the question was clarification on the 1,030, tying to the report provided on page 2. And on page 2, we break it down into 2 line items. Operating fund 1,023, lot fund $7. So those 2 numbers added together represent the 1,030 that's shown on the summary report on page 3. Okay. All right, this next report is a further analysis or breakdown of our operations in direct comparison to the current year budget. What we attempt to show here is to show how the budget is forecasted to change. So the first column, the blue assessment funding, represents the net financial impact or the gross financial impact of all of those activities. The green is set up to show the per lot impact. And then the next blue column shows the change with how this year's budget compares to the proposed budget. The highlighted pink area or red is got percentage changes in those line items, and then a per lot impact again in the green column. So in here, not to continue to confuse which number we're talking about. You've got the 1,030 represented just before the total at the bottom. If you look at the chart there, so it shows you the 1,023 and the 7. The other pieces of operating assessment involve your water assessment and your sewer assessment. So those get added in at $48 a piece. So your total operating assessment is $1,126 for all activities here at Woodhaven. So that includes your water and sewer operation, your lot fund, your subsidiary operations, everything that involves operations is $1,126 for lots with sewer and $1,078 with lots that are not sewer. Okay, I'm going to leave this screen up because the next areas that we're going to talk about, there's 2 pages, a lot of words. We had some pictures here for a while. So now we got to get into some of the details with the words. So the next 2.5 pages really kind of focus on how this report is put together. So for example, if you look at administration management, it shows a 13% increase, 12.81%. All right, that's kind of out of the norm, although depending on whose inflation numbers you use, it might be normal. I don't know. But in our type of planning and processing, that's out of the norm. So there will be some extra explanation in these bullet points to help identify why that's different. And as you go through that, you're going to see that we try to highlight that in the text that's provided in the next 2.5 pages. So we're going to talk about each department and each section as we move through it. But in general, we start with the overall statement, which is again 1,126 and 1,078 respectively. I think the percentage change is right at about 4%. A little more, a little less. I can't remember. I know the operating assessment at 1,023 is an increase of 4.4%. You have a decrease in the lot fund, and you have a reduction from prior projections in the water and the sewer assessments. All of our assessment income includes a 2% adjustment to account for people who pay for discounts in full. In other words, if they make their payment in full, we give them a $30 discount for sewered lots and a $25 discount for non-sewered lots. We use a 2% variable to calculate how much of that discount will actually occur. That's based on about 50% of the ownership paying for those fees by March 31st in full and taking advantage of those discounts. And that's been running. Yes, Dave. Yeah, we've been running. We've actually been trending a little better each year. We'll see. There's been a lot of free money available to people, and I think we've seen it kind of climb a little bit. So I'm expecting it to level off. We've ranged anywhere from 48 to about 52% of full payments. Just depends. So that 2% is a pretty good number, but it's included in our budget plan so that it's offset. The other thing that we do, we project a deficit into our plan, and that's reflected on the summary sheet. 154,455 is the projected deficit this year. Comparatively speaking, it's within $1,500 of last year's deficit, which we are projected to actually beat this year and then generate a surplus with that. There's a lot of planning that goes into that, and we have historically been able to outperform our budgets to offset the deficit and many times generate a surplus that we have to consider as well. But that's built into the budget plan. One of the recommendations that's included in this plan, we have a wage and compensation plan, and I do have a copy of the plan here if anybody needs to see that as well. We have a wage scale that's based right now on a starting wage of $17 an hour for full-time employees. We are proposing and recommending in this plan to increase that to 18. So that is included in this budget plan, and all of the wages have been adjusted in this budget plan based on that happening. So in addition to that dollar increase, we will also consider a 3% merit adjustment for all full-time positions. So that those adjustments are built into this plan. We are starting to, we made the jump to $17 3 years ago. And it really helped us actually get through the pandemic. We were in a very stable position. We are now starting to see some of the trickle effect of everybody else's reaction to what's going on. And it's getting harder and harder to keep some of these positions filled. We know that it's not just about the money, but we do need to get in the ballpark, and that's what we're recommending to the board, and that is included in this budget plan. In addition to that, we're also recommending some organizational structure changes within the plan to, I think, strengthen our position as an organization. The net impact has been identified for the board at about a $15,000 impact is what we anticipate. And the objective with this management change or this restructuring is to develop opportunities for growth within this organization. And then to also kind of strengthen our organization for turnover. Get in a better position that if we do have turnover at critical and key levels, that we're stronger and better to be able to handle that. So those are all some of the factors that have gone in, but that is included in this. That particular change is really impacting administration management and resource management in this budget. And we'll talk about that as we go through. So moving down to the next bullet point, we're going to talk about administration management. One of the key things that I would like to point out here is all of the earnings from Woody Inc., Woodhaven Lakes Realty, and the utility fund flow back into this department. So those are reflected as negative numbers on the chart. So Woody Inc., a positive return of 98,000, Woodhaven Lakes Realty, a projected return of 35, and what the utility fund, a projected return of 204. All of those things go to offset planned expenditures for the management. And then some of the history is provided in the detailed schedule that I ask you to read. And if you have questions, let me know. Some other significant changes is investment income is increasing. So we've adjusted the income up. We've seen a little bit of a different impact than we thought on replacement classes. So there's some changes in that number and that gross number that you're looking at in line 1. Payroll for this department includes 5 positions. There's about 10,000 plus hours of work. This is also where the organizational change will be implemented. It establishes a general manager of maintenance position. This will be a promotion from within. It retitles our general manager of administrative services to a general manager of business operations, which is an existing position. And then it realigns some of the department activity within our organization. So general manager of member services has no changes, and that's currently Randy Kaler. Public safety, recreation, IT, Woodhaven Lakes Realty, and ESAC flow through the general manager of maintenance of member services. General manager of administrative services is currently Amy Ackert. Her title will change to business operations general manager. She will pick up the utility, not the utility. She will pick up the Woody Inc. operation in direct reporting, in addition to all of the other administrative tasks, human resources, finance, collections, and administrative services. And then our general manager of member services will be Greg Dimmick. He will continue to oversee all of the operations and departments that he does. In addition to that, he would also oversee the utility department. Those 3 general managers will report to me, and then we will funnel and control the decision making through our board and through our policies and procedures. Some other things that are included. We had a referendum process that's been removed from the budget. We had an election process last year that's been removed from the budget. Bad debt expenses are projected at 2%. We are currently knocking that number out of the park, but we want to stay at 2% in our budget planning. There's a lot of what ifs in the future and controls, but we are currently collecting better than 99% of our available assessments. So this is a positive in our budget. But we are still feeling strongly that we need to leave the 2% allocation as our projection. And hopefully we will continue to have that success. That will help to offset some of that deficit that we talked about earlier. This is the area where there's probably the biggest changes occurring. So before I move on, I guess I want to just kind of give a breath. If anybody has any questions or wants to talk about the organizational structure changes, okay. Heather, thank you.
I don't want to get too deep into the woods on this or the grass, but under other income changes, equal income from investments trending higher. Who or what do we as an association invest with or invest in?
Good question. I'm going to repeat it. Hopefully everybody heard it, but the question is, with regard to investments, who, what, where does the association invest in, and how do we go about doing that? So there's several layers to this. So in this context for the administration management, it's our operating fund. Okay, in the restricted, there's a lot more activity there as well. So I'm going to try to break it down into starting with the operations. Okay. We do have an investment policy that tells us that I, as the manager of that right now, have to invest in things that are fairly secure. So CDs, government agencies, things like that. And in the recent past, those rates have been awful. We have not been able to see any kind of positive return. And in particular for our operations, we typically would invest in very short terms. Because we would get a lot of our money in March, but we don't need to spend it until September. So it'd be nice if I could find a 6-month CD to park it for a while. And in the past, that's what we would do. The good news about all the stuff that's going on is rates are really climbing. A year ago, we couldn't get anywhere from like 0.2. There are some 6 months rates over 4 right now. So we will probably, when we made this projection, it wasn't over 4. I mean, the numbers just keep climbing right now. And at some point, that's all gonna, there's a limited control that we have. But what we will do is when we collect our money in March, if you choose to pay and everybody in this room chooses to pay, we're gonna have more than we need in March. So what we do is we try to schedule and ladder it out so that it comes due when we need it. And that's where, when we do our budget planning, we do our monthly projections. That's on the operating side. Okay. The restricted side gets a little more complicated because we're actually using the 15-year window of our reserve plan. So now instead of just looking at 3 and 6 and 9-month investments, we're now looking at anywhere from those time periods all the way up to maybe even 7, 8, 9, 10-year investments. But it's all regulated on our policy. It's in our policy manual that tells us what we're allowed to do. And then we just got to work within those parameters to make that happen.
Is it a company, a financial planner?
We currently use a company called Cetera for our CD investments. We also use First State Bank Mendota. They have a Cedars program that has been beneficial occasionally. And they also have what they call an ICS account, which allows us to protect money there as well. And that's what we work on. Yep. Brokered CDs right now are off the charts. That's why the banks don't like it when our money comes due, and I say, but I can get 4. They want to renew it 2.5. I said, but I can get 4. So we're negotiating and working that, but you should see a lot better numbers, and I think you'll see a lot better than 6 that's projected in the budget right now.
The brokerage accounts, those typically aren't doing as well because markets are down.
The CD, the brokered CDs actually are what's doing the best right now. And then agencies are starting to creep up. So like treasury bills and different things. So those will start with, we'll start to move some of our money into treasuries as the Fed keeps raising. I don't know how many of you pay attention to that stuff. Okay, I do. I'm guilty. But it's as the Fed keeps deciding what they're going to do, as they keep bumping the interest rates, which you hear them talk about it all the time. What that's going to start to do is there's going to start to be some development of agency investments again, either treasury bills or treasury agencies. 10 years ago, we were probably 60% treasuries and 40% brokered CDs. Right now, we're more like 99% brokered CDs because the agencies they're gonna trail it and they'll come up, and so we're working to ladder that to hit the market and get the best rates we can. In the end, it's a crapshoot, to be honest with you. So, is that too far in the weeds, Chris?
No,
Because I'm now pushing my 90-minute limit. No. No, good questions. Everybody online seems to be okay. Okay, so then we move into accounting, payroll and collections. There's 6 full-time positions. We are asking for an additional support position in this department that is listed. This also talks about our audit process is also covered through this department, and we will be hiring a new audit firm next year. Overhead department is 114. Income tax benefits, there's an advantage we get between our subsidiaries. If Woodhaven Lakes Realty was its own entity and it generated the kind of revenue that it generates for us or has been generating, you would have to pay tax on it. But because we do a consolidated return, we have losses in our operating fund that allow us to offset that income, and we don't pay taxes. We do an internal charge to balance it, and that's all part of GAAP for general accepted accounting principles and how you report that. We want to show you what this entity would do if it had to pay taxes. On the flip side, we don't actually pay the taxes, and we show the benefit in there. Your electric supply contract currently is with AEP. It's a fixed supply rate through December of 2023. The rate is very good right now. We locked in at a good time. We had a 3-year guarantee on that. Not sure what we're going to be looking at next December. We will put this out to bid. We will get information. We'll be able to talk about it as a board. Worst case scenario, if it goes south on us, it's only 3 months of the year that will be impacted. And we should know that answer when we do the budget next year, where we stand on that. Other things, work comp, general liability, group health insurance rates, all those things are working out pretty well for us. And are been at manageable levels. Marketing IT has 7 full-time positions, about 13,500 hours. This is where the Woodhaven News adjustment is being considered, and I'm gonna have Nikki kind of come up and talk a little bit about the digital formatting that we are going to be switching to, and then answer any questions that she might have. So here comes Nikki for those online.
Okay. So as we talked about in the workshops, the newsprint version of the newspaper that we have been doing is not necessarily obsolete and kind of going that way. The bigger news conglomerates are kind of buying up all the small ones where we can print our paper, kind of getting narrowed down. So we talked about moving to a digital style print. So what we have done since we last spoke at the workshops is get a couple samples together from MCS, who does all of our printing. That's what this looked like. So I had kind of told you, look very similar to our annual report. And it does. This is really quickly put together. So there's some typos. Charlie probably couldn't handle it when we were giving them to him last month. So sorry. But this is what it looks like. So this is using, sorry, more of your regular inkjet style kind of printer, as opposed to going back and forth the 4 times like a newsprint does. So I know you can't see real close. I'll pass around a couple, but the quality is much better. We anticipate with that, hopefully some additional advertising options can be increased. Our advertising income hopefully will be increased as well. So as Jeff noted, we talked about the subscription fees and kind of went through some of that stuff. And just with the new data system that we're getting, there's a lot that needs to happen. And so we're going to do a little bit more research on that, maybe come back to that in a year, maybe 2, and check that out. So if you want to see a copy of this, I can pass this around. I said I've got 2. This is generally what we're looking at. What's that?
There's another one.
Yep, I've got 2. You got some too. We'll pass them around. So if we can just get them back, because I've only got a couple. Does anybody have any questions about how the process works? Yeah.
Not familiar with much with digital, but with digital, is there a difference between full color pricing and possibly less color?
You can either do full color or straight black and white. So yes, there was a bit of a difference, but for us, I personally think that's going a little bit backwards, because we did have black and white newsprint 12, 13 years ago, switched to full color. I think we kind of lose the advertising opportunities. I think it was about 2,000 an issue. Yeah. Yes,
Difference in the shipping costs.
this does run into a postage issue. If we get over 40 pages an issue, we go from the normal pricing that we have with the newsprint right now, which is a bulk mail, to a price per piece. So we are going to have to get a little creative sometimes with content to try and stay below that as much as possible. There will be a few issues a year where we're going to run into that when we run the rules, when we run the budget, that kind of thing. Yes, good question. I should give you guys.
They're different.
Any other thoughts, questions? Anybody online got anything?
Oh, you do.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, everybody. A couple of things that we see in converting to the digital is you don't have minimums. So if you do get to where you can get creative about, you know, encouraging property owners to accept their notifications online and not go the physical mailing and printing, you will see some savings down the road. But it still needs to be evaluated further and figured out. But digital printing, the one strength that you have is these copies that Nikki's got. We contacted the printer and he printed 7 of them or 10 of them in no time at all. You cannot do that with newsprint material. Takes too long to set up, and you're never going to do a 10 or a 20 or even 100 copy run in most cases for a print shop like that. So. Okay. Thank you, Nikki, again. Recreation, aquatics and recplex. Recreation has 2 full-time positions, about 10 part-time. Aquatics, 1 full-time, 25 part-time. And recplex, we are asking to upgrade the recplex manager position from a seasonal part-time to a year-round full-time equivalent. And then there's about 20 part-time positions in that department. Again, our activity level and our programming will be very similar to what you've seen this year, with some small tweaks and modifications. We did see a significant increase in revenue in this facility with our ice cream sales, and we have adjusted the budget according to that. So there is a substantial increase that's been built in. We had really a good year in this facility compared to our budget. So we did adjust about a $28,000 increase in income from this location. Public safety has 16 full-time positions, 13 part-time, about 40,000 man hours. This is an area where we are probably having the most turnover in terms of our departments. Part of that is it's a 24-hour shift, 3 shifts. There always seems to be a position that we're trying to fill. And we're going to try to get more competitive and work on that. But maintenance, janitorial, ESAC, and resource management are departments 141, 142, 143, 144. Maintenance, 5 full-time positions, 1 part-time. Biggest trends that we're seeing, trash removal costs are going up. We've increased the budget by about $11,000 for trash removal, and vehicle operation costs have gone up significantly, which we're all experiencing personally as well. That's predominantly gas prices. And that's about a $36,000 increase to your budget. Janitorial, 6 full-time, 2 part-time. ESAC, 5 full-time, 1 part-time. Trending for citations has gone up, so we did adjust the budget for that by about 20,000. Nuisance abatement, cleanup and income expenses were adjusted to be more representative of what we're seeing right now. We're starting to get down to a more manageable level from the tornado and all the other things that we experienced in 2015 and the years that followed. And then the resource payroll is where one of the adjustments, or is where that organizational structure change adjustments occurring. 5 full-time positions, 16 part-time, about 19,000 hours. And your forestry maintenance line item is another area where we're seeing significant increases in cost. So we've increased the line item budget for forestry maintenance by $30,000. Lot fund continues to to do, continues to include funding to make improvements for the lot, taken back and to get lots back in the market and sell them. At the workshop, I talked about how significant this particular funds, it's only $7, but how significant it is over the time and the years that we've had it. We currently, as soon as this last lot closes, we don't have any lots for sale. 0. We have approximately, I think just over 30, is that about right? 32, somewhere between 30 and 35 lots that we use for various programs, guest lot programs, marketing programs, and our coast to coast programs. That's all we own for lots. That's mainly what's going to get maintained here. But when I started in 90 and then about the mid 90s, we had almost 200 lots that we owned that we were trying to sell. Okay, and we were also at 6% delinquency on assessments. So in the 90s, late 90s, mid to late 90s, had 200 lots that we owned. That's more than 3% of your revenue base that's not available to you because you didn't bill them. You couldn't send them a bill, and you had 6% delinquency. So you were approaching 9–10% delinquency at that particular point in time. One of the things that we've been able to do over time is take all of that and kind of blend that back in. Now you're looking at less than 1% delinquency and you own 0 lots for sale. Okay, that's nearly an 8 or 9% gain in terms of your realized revenue that you can generate as an organization. We've been able to blend that through the years. So when we bought the utility company, we were able to blend some things in and help soften the blow for some of these increases. And inflation was very low historically. And if you look at the history and as we get farther in this report, you're going to see that our incremental increases were pretty small compared to what we're looking at now. And so the challenge that's before us is, as this inflation changes and as all of us have to experience it, there isn't a magic location where we can blend this through. In other words, if our delinquency goes up a little bit, it's going to have a negative adverse impact on our financial position. If our delinquency rate, I said the delinquency rate, we'll pick up some ownership. All of those things will put stress on us. And so what you're going to see later in this in our forecasting is that our increases are higher going forward in the future. They're still at, I think, a very manageable level, but there's less areas for us to find benefit and to get strength and to grow from that. So let's just keep that in mind. But this particular department has been a critical department for us. And I'm really happy with where this fund is at. And it is, it costs us $7 to take care of about 35 lots right now. It also allows us to clean up any that we happen to pick up. And the good part is we're able to turn them around and sell them fairly quickly right now. The next area is the water and sewer fund. There's 3 full-time positions. We did remove, we've been doing a sewer televising and cleaning project for quite a few years. I think shortly after we purchased in 2008 the assets, we started an annual program where we would clean the sewer lines and then televise them to see if we were getting any infiltration problems. We've been through the park twice, and our contractor is no longer in business, and we've decided to take a break for a while, and we'll continue to monitor and see where that goes. So that's been removed from the budget for the time being, and we will take a look at that another year or 2 down the road. It may come back. And assessments are the same because of that. General store, service center. General store has 3 full-time positions, 29 part-time positions, about 15,000 man hours. Service center, 6 full-time positions, 15 part-time, about 16,000 man hours. One of the recommendations in this budget is a change in the service center. We're gonna consolidate a number of part-time positions, and we're looking to hire one more full-time position to help with office duties, cashiering, and some different things up front. The net change is estimated at about $7,000 with that. Income has been trending higher, and we've made some adjustments to do that. Woodhaven Lakes Realty, 3 full-time positions, 2 part-time, about 8,500 hours, 3 independent contractors. And again, we've seen really good sales the last 2 to 3 years. This is an area where I'm sort of conservative, I guess, and cautious about. I'm not sure that we can keep sustaining what we've been doing the last 2 to 3 years. I think we will trend a little bit the other direction. But budget wise, it's very comparable to what we've been doing. I see Mary's jumping on, is that correct? Great. Any questions on any of the operating budget before we kind of move on to some of the other sections? Yes, Nancy.
In the guest slot, the 18.
Yes.
Under all of them.
The guest slots. So the question is, how often are the 18 guest slots occupied? I'm gonna kind of look to Randy for a little bit of that information.
I don't have exact occupancy rates, but when we look at the lots, typically on a holiday weekend, they are all booked. I would say on a normal summer weekend, just probably over the last 3 years, about 75%, and that's a combination of property owners who are using the guest lot for one of their guests. That is for the coast to coast lots, of which there are 5. And then Realty does use them sparingly for guests who are interested in Woodhaven and want to come in and learn more and are looking at property.
I was basically interested in the guest slot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions on operating activities? Okay. So the next section talks about the surplus results from fiscal year 21-22. I do talk about it in here, and I should go over that. The bylaws. Currently, Woodhaven has a bylaw that provides guidance on how a surplus is to be distributed if the surplus exceeds $100,000. In this particular case, it's well below 100,000. But if the board cannot reach a supermajority on anything over 100, there are some specifications on how that money would be redistributed to the membership. 30% would be returned as a credit, and 70% would be allocated to reserve, unless some other supermajority was reached by the board. In this particular case, we have a surplus of $10,577. In the grand scheme of things, it's a fairly small number. We are recommending in this budget to allocate all of that to reserves, and it will be transferred to the restricted fund once the budget's approved. As far as our projections go, we continue to have a lot of really good things happening this year in several areas. I mean, the real estate office is still doing very well sales wise. Service center and store have been able to meet or exceed their numbers. We're in positive positions in a lot of areas, in large part because of turnover. Okay, we're not able to keep all the positions filled, and as a result, we're paying less in payroll, which is resulting in favorable budgets across the board and in other areas. So it's something that we will continue to keep on, but we estimate based on all of the factors, and collection rates are as well there. That's probably a 70 or 80,000, maybe $100,000 favorable to be less than 1% right now from where we're at. So we are projected to end the year with a favorable number. We do expect that it will probably exceed 100,000, and when we visit with you next year, we'll talk about that. And we'll have some decisions to make. Couple things to keep in mind, we do projections. Numbers are gonna change all the way right up until March. We don't make any definitive decision until we know what the actual audit number is, and we won't know that until next year about the annual meeting. So once we get that result, it'll be part of next year's budget process, and we'll give some consideration at that time. Debt management, the great news, last year we talked about, we paid off all of our tornado debt 3 years early. So the only debt that remains on the books is the water and sewer system assets, which we purchased, whoops. Fat fingered that one, sorry. We purchased the original assets in 2008. We had a 25-year amortization plan, I believe, when we bought it at that time. The tornado kind of changed our plans. In 2015, we did a restructuring. We went to a 16-year amortization for that plan. We're currently paying $348,000 back to ourselves at a 4% interest rate to pay off this loan. That's the $62 on sewered lots and the $31 on non-sewered lots. Current outstanding balance at 4/1/22 is $4,056,000. And we estimate final payment to be done April of 2038. Any questions on any of those last three topics? Okay, we're moving on to page 8 in the packet. It's the consolidated income analysis. And in this area, we show a couple of different schedules. So the first one is the source of funds to kind of break down where all the money comes from in this plan. So when we put this together, we're now consolidating all the operating and the restricted stuff. Okay, up until this point in the presentation, our focus has been on the operating pieces. And the operating pieces are the 1,030, the 48, down to that citations, advertising, and miscellaneous for 286. All of that is your operating income. When we go to this, the distribution of funds on the next chart, we'll talk about that as well. But everything below that, the 247, the 30, 31, and 31, those are all restricted or debt service revenue sources. We are estimating total revenue needs of 11,532,000. And we would be using about 267,000 of reserves to cover the list of projects, which we're going to get into that list here shortly. So you have a total balance of 11,799,000 this year compared to a balance of 11,229,000 the year before. So the other side of this is where are we going to put all that money that we're collecting from you? We are a not-for-profit. Our objective is to collect the money and redistribute it and funnel it to all those appropriate sources. So from personnel down to other expenses on this distribution sheet represents your operating costs, your operating activities. Okay, capital replacements for association assets, water sewer projects, new projects, and debt payments represent what the restricted funds are used for. We do anticipate collecting extra money for water and sewer reserves and would increase that by 190,000. Again, balances out to the 11,799,387. This report is to just connect the dots that you can see all the money collected, all the money's dispersed. And we need to balance that and process that through. And that goes with our not-for-profit status and our organization as a not-for-profit corporation. Okay. The next area we're going to get into, and I've got the next chart broken down into a number of slides here because there's a long list of things to take care of. But with regard to our list of assets, I talked about the facilities planning committee's role within the organizations. They start with a list at the beginning of the year of planned projects for fiscal year 23-24. And then we go through and we review all of those and determine whether we're going to keep them on the list, change their costs, make allocations, make changes and different things. So during this process, we started with a list that had $1,293,000 in costs. There were 2 projects reduced, 10 projects were increased, 9 projects were added into this list. So when you look at these next 3 slides on the board, and when you look in the schedule here, there's a little character that looks like a tree or an arrow pointing up. Those are line items where we had to increase the budget. If it's turned upside down, those are line items where we decrease the budget. And if there's a letter A next to it, it was added. In other words, it wasn't on the original list. Okay, so this first chart shows you the vehicles. There's 4 vehicles scheduled, a number of items for furniture and equipment through the restaurant. It does not include the store, which is on the next slide, and then a number of other projects in here. I think the only project that I specifically talk about in the text is the change to computer system upgrade allocation on this slide. And that is because we're expecting the project that we're currently working on to carry over, and those costs will be increased next year. We added $35,000 to that, so we have a projected budget of 85. And that'll cover all of the carryover for the project that's going on, along with a lot of the other things that come up every year that we have to address for our IT operations here at Woodhaven. I'm going to keep going along. If there's any projects that you want us to talk about, slow me down, but I'm going to hit the big ones as we go through this. The next slide covers the general store, service center, grounds and building projects. The biggest project on this list and the largest is the underground storage tanks at the service center. They are older than 30 years. They've been targeted and identified through our annual checks as an item that needs to be replaced. So we have we initiated discussion on the underground tank. What's that, Jim? Okay. Did I misspeak?
It's the need to be replaced, right? I mean, it's more I'm gonna take it for.
Well, again, the need, it's not an emergency. And I think we've talked about that with facilities planning. But it has been identified that the tanks are beyond their expected life.
Well, beyond the expected life, but we don't have X-ray vision, so therefore we see the condition they're in, they could be nowhere near their life expectancy. I'm just looking at the money that over the years that gas stations cost us, and now they're talking about the tanks, and I'm just rambling here, Scott, so bear with me.
Everybody's entitled to ramble.
When they're not leaking, technically, there's nothing wrong with them. I
But we don't-
understand lifespans, but there's nothing wrong with them.
No, but if they leak, then guess what? We have to deal with EPA.
Well, I fully understand all that, but there's nothing wrong with them when we test them on a regular basis. You know, I'm not looking to get into an argument with anybody here. I was just mumbling under my.
Again, but Jim brings up a point that has been part of the discussion to this point. And so this has been discussed. These concerns have been discussed. The board has reviewed them, the committee has reviewed them, and the recommendation is that we need to start planning and scheduling for this. Now, this project would not start until after next season. So we are looking at a project that is at least a year out before it would get done. There are definitely inflationary concerns with the longer you wait. There's all kinds of other things, as Jim has indicated. I mean, you could find a problem by taking care of this problem. that may increase some costs and cause some discussion. So bottom line is between this and then addressing the gas pump dispensers, you're looking at a $500,000 project. That's a big project. It can't be done for less. That's the part that we have to figure out. So either, you know,
And if we wait and something happens, then it's going to cost way more to fix it.
it could,
Right.
it very well could. And that's why it's been put on the table, and that's why we're talking about it, and that's where the discussion, I'm sure will continue with this project.
Is there a state mandate that life expectancy?
30 years. 30 years. Part of the issue, with these tanks is they're single walled. They're not double walled. They were installed, late 80s. They do have protection, and as Jim said, and we've talked about the protections have indicated we're fine. But the people who do all the testing, and so then you get into complications about insurance. And people saying, well, I'm not going to insure a 30-year-old tank, or I'm not going to do this. So there are a lot of variables that go into what we're doing here. This is the biggest project on our list. And it's going to warrant some conversation, consideration on those issues. Any other comments? I'm not trying to get into an argument either. We're just kind of talking.
Regulations get ready to change in that too, it's using single wall tanks and having.
In order, if we do the project, we have to upgrade the.
Right, because the regulations.
Well, they're already in place.
Right.
Most of those are already in place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know that there has not been a mandate, and I want to make sure everybody understands, there's not been a mandate that we have to do this yet. But as a matter of practice and discussion, we feel very strongly that we need to think about it and schedule it. And right now, it has met the point to be included, and it's recommended to be included in next year's budget. Mark, did you have did we get, okay, I'm sorry to interrupt there, okay. I mean, there's another area in here that I talk about is the equipment in the general store deli line. That got quite a bit of discussion among the committee members. There are basically from 82,601 down to 82,605. Those are all part of the deli line at the general store. There was a lot of back and forth and discussion on that. You have a number of projects that add up to a fairly significant number there as well. And the feelings and the recommendations from the committees and the board are that we should proceed with replacing the equipment in that line and resetting the line a little bit. There's some other changes that are planned for that. Anything else on this list? Okay, we get to this last piece. This is the bottom half or the bottom third of the list, road improvements, the annual allocation. We do have some sign work still planned in next year's budget. One of the projects that got some discussion this process was Bass Lake is scheduled for a dredging project in fiscal year 25-26. And it's been, it's good practice to get your planning and do your study, to get your information, to get your permits so you can do that project. So we are recommending to allocate about $40,000 for some engineering work to do some studies on that and to start to develop how much material you want to remove from that lake. Filtration problems for the filtration system improvements at both facilities are planned next year. A project that got delayed that impacts professional services is there's a project for consideration. It is included in the plan. We're going to talk about it here shortly, but it's improvements at the beach and then the shoreline along the beach from the boat rental area all the way over to the ramp in section 24. There's some consideration on making some improvements to shore up that shoreline and to address some terracing and some other issues and a number of other things that we have allocated approximately $40,000 in professional services to do some studies and get some better information on that project. That's included in this, so the number is now $1,499,500 for planned projects on the current list. Water and sewer projects are all the annual allocations that are set up. And all of these are part of what we put out to address any pumping equipment, water mains, sewer mains, and any computer or SCADA improvements are noted here as well. So the biggest area, well, not really, because we pushed the one off. The initial amount of new projects was $625,000. A lot of that was connected to that beach renovation project. That's been pushed off to 24, 25. A number of projects are included in here. The shoreline stabilization for sections 8, 9 is a project that has already been approved by the board. It's actually a 3-phase improvement project. We've allocated funding for 2 phases. That'll start here in the next few weeks. And it's basically the tributary that comes in from the service center side of the property next to the maintenance building and then zigzags into Bass Lake from there. There's been a lot of erosion and undercutting on that creek bed that is a major upgrade here to stop that from happening. That should positively impact future dredging projects at Bass Lake. That is the goal for that. So the 3rd phase is planned to be completed next year. 2 phases are scheduled for this year. Couple smaller projects, got a fishing pier, you've got.
I think you should mention that that's impinging on some of the property owners too. Because they have a property.
You're talking about the shoreline project?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's cutting into the hillside, section 9 in that cul-de-sac. And then a little further down in another cul-de-sac on the other side. Yeah, absolutely. I guess the main thing is for people to understand that project is approved. In other words, we're under a contractual obligation to proceed with it. All of the other projects that are on here have not been approved. So kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at this. Fishing pier at Bass Lake Section 4, portable pressure washer, digital scanning machine. Plans are to extend the paved trail that goes up the hillside here. And then loop it around for the open market trail is planned for next year. Some catch limit signs, a boat dock improvement. The next big project that's listed here is the LP storage tank at the service center. We currently have a 30,000 gallon tank that we purchase our bulk supply of LP and then pump it out through the bobtail and everything. The proposal is to purchase another 30,000 gallon tank, which will double our capacity. The advantage of this particular project is a financial advantage when the market conditions allow us to buy more gas at good pricing. Basically doubling our capacity gives us more flexibility to manage that operation. We believe that it has about a 6 to 10 year payback, and it has cleared the hurdle for the committees and the board, and we are recommending to go ahead and add that storage tank to that facility. We currently generate in the neighborhood of $1 million in gross sales for our LP gas operation annually. And that's a combination of off-property and on-property customer business. So it is a huge part of our service center operation. The last one got the most excitement of the staff or the committee because Rusty had a video showing how the hydrovac machine worked. But it is a very useful tool for a number of things. It should reduce some of our risk in digging projects and give us a lot more flexibility in making improvements underground. So are there any questions about any of the new projects on this list? There's more detail in the packet as well. Any questions? Okay, what do we got next? Where am I at? All right, I'm all the way to page 11. How am I doing, Chris?
216.
I got 15 minutes, 14 to be exact. Some future project information. I talked about the beach renovations, combined with the Woodhaven Lake shoreline improvements. There's a couple of boat pier projects, one for 24-25, one for 25-26. There's several projects that were removed from the plan, and those are listed on this particular slide in the packet for you. The first four are mostly related to, we just don't have a specific project. Expanded wireless services, we've been talking about them for years, but there isn't a project that you can determine this is what we're gonna do. Here's how you're gonna do it. Here's what the costs are. And until we can do that, we're gonna take these off the list. And if something comes up and we keep looking, then we will reintroduce that project and we'll have hopefully productive discussion how to proceed with that. The others are watershed down to that. The aquatic splash park was defeated by the referendum. That's been removed. Beach inflatables has been recommended to be removed based on an analysis that's been completed by staff and then also presented and supported by the committee. So as we move on to the bottom portion of page 11 in the handout, there's a lot of information that's provided on our reserve plan, narrative explaining how we analyze to the 30% funded. So our goal is to maintain 30% funded reserves. This includes allocation of the surplus, includes the recommended project list. It also includes any other adjustments that we've made to meet this objective in the planning and the schedules that you have in front of you. So in the association reserves, we had a plan that was on the books. It was approved in March. We made adjustments through all of this process. That's what all those bullet points talk about. The updated plan has changed from the projection for fiscal year 35-36. We were at 12.3 million. The current plan has dropped to 11.8 at that same time period. So we've seen an increase in costs, an increase in inflation, and it's going to adversely impact your reserve. We've also had to put more money towards operations, which means reserves did take a little bit of a hit in this plan. We dropped from 31.39% to 30.5%. So we're still meeting the 30% funded objective through that year. You'll see in this report when I bring them up, we are trending in a direction that will drop. So we'll have to consider how we're going to attack that in the future. On the water and sewer side, we also had some adjustments, reducing from 5.4 million to 5.1 over the life of the reserve and from 32% down to 30.86.
I'm confused. So the association reserve projection, 2035-36, 12.3, I see that.
Okay.
Reserve balance recommended 1. Back to your slide. Okay, it says 31.9, 31.39 to 11.8. Where's your 11.8? I don't, it says 11.9.
Did I write the wrong number now?
Here. And then it's got 30.8.
Okay. So I have a number that got in a little different than what I have for my slide. You know what?
But which one's right? I mean, is that slide right? Slide more. I mean.
What's in the package, right? Because Charlie had done an edit of it. The one in the packet, the one in the packet.
11.9.
It's 11.9. It's slightly different than what you have there.
And then 30.8. So it's
Correct.
higher. Okay.
Yeah, Charlie had pointed out several things and I just didn't update my PowerPoint
Okay.
because that's what we had in the old slide. So in the packet, you're going to see slightly different numbers. You're going to see 11.9 and 30.8 as opposed to the slide which says 11.8 and 30.5. I believe that the utility fund is correct. So that's the only item that we would have changed.
Yeah, that was right.
And that's the slide I put in, so I fixed it here, I just didn't fix it in the narrative, sorry, Charlie. Okay, so one of the things that I'm talking about in this, in how the reserve is impacting us, we just need to make a note of it. If you see the 36, 37 year drops below 30%. So as it's trending and as we're set up to go, it's gonna go lower. We have to have some budget wins along the way to offset that. Basically is what that boils down to. So if we're scheduling $500,000 for a underground storage tank project and a gas pump dispenser project, and we happen to get it done for 450, that's a budget win. That 50,000 then becomes part of the reserve and it should help us and push those numbers back up. The other area that we know is on the horizon, which you can't see yet on the schedule because we're not there yet. But if you heard me say earlier about the internal debt for the water and sewer assets, final payment will take place on April 1 of 2038. So it's 2 years, it's one more year after this. 2 more years after this. That will come out of the schedule. So what that will do is it will free up $62 or $31 of your assessment plan that we will be able to analyze and manage over the 15 years that rolls through the plan. So one of the things that I see happening and developing for us as we get through a couple more years of this is you'll start to see those years funnel in and we can manage through this and we can help to increase and offset. And hopefully, again, we'll have more budget wins on how we set up these budgets. So if we project the cost and we can do it for better than that, then we're good. Obviously, on both halves of this, you need your operating also to have budget wins. We can't keep having to push operating up a few bucks more than what we have projected, because the only way you can do that without increasing total assessment is reduce what you put in your reserve. And that's kind of what we're doing right now, is we're sort of balancing that and trying to manage that through. Okay. What do I have next? Water and sewer system reserves, that's all at the bottom of page 11. Talked about at the top of page 12. Okay, the next sets of schedules on pages 12 and 13 talk about your assessments. So based on everything, we're proposing an assessment level of $1,495 for sewered lots, $1,375 for non-sewered lots. This is $10 higher than when we started. We are proposing that this is your fixed assessment for the next 3 years. So this will be the same assessment for 24-25 and for 25-26. What you will see in the schedule at the bottom of page 12, I believe, is the compounding effect of some of these operating costs that I've talked about, where you can't keep fighting that. So as you see, for example, the first 3-year cycle on this schedule is a $10 increase. The next 3-year cycle is a $20 increase, because the 10 is going to push it already $10 higher. And inflation numbers are pushing the operating a little bit higher each year. So you see a $10 increase with the first cycle, the $20 increase for the second, 50 for the third, 90 for the fourth, and 125 for the fifth. So you can see that that's escalating, and that's also going to be connected to my conversation about managing, manage our organization through high inflationary times. Right now, this is building in the inflationary conditions that we're dealing with over the life of the plan, where the past history has not. And as we get into the plan adjustments, you're going to see in the breakdown Prior year allocations are provided, so you can see the history from, I believe, 2008. The average percentage increase when you scale this out is still under 2.6%. It's up from 2.35. For sewer, or for non-sewer lots, it's 3.09, up from 285. So when you look at the schedules, and these are really small, I'm sure, they're not too bad, small up here. So the blue items indicate areas where we had to increase. So as I'm explaining to you, those are all in the operating segment of this chart. And so what we've tried to do is manage that through on the other sides, and you can see we did reduce the operating costs for the water and sewer a little bit. But over time, we reduced the reserve fund early, but as you got later into the restricted fund, we had to also increase that to try to keep up and to get that 30% goal that we're targeting for our reserve fund. You can see the incremental changes, how they calculate out. This is for lots with sewer service. And this is for lots without sewer service. 3 minutes, I'm done. Until I get questions. Any questions from anybody at the present time? Yes, sir.
Like 3-4 pages back.
No problem.
If we're talking about that underground thing.
Yeah. Yep.
That means you take your lifetime convert. Are the gas pumps that, I know they're pretty frequently in the work.
Well, the issue, yeah. Dean, right? Yeah, Dean, thank you. I thought I remembered you. The issues with the gas pump are also the piping and everything too there. And so what's going to end up happening is if we're going to go down and we're going to dig up and replace the underground storage tanks, we're going to probably just dig up all of that concrete and reset some new concrete. And that's basically what we've kind of come to the conclusion of. So the gas pumps, this is the time to do the gas pumps if you're going to do them. And that's why they're mirrored together and they've been recommended together. At the end of the day, they're not going to mirror up and match up exactly with time and condition, and then you'll have to manage that. So that's why they're being recommended together, because all of the excavation and all the work that needs to be done and all of the piping from the tanks to the dispensers has to be upgraded as well. So that's why those are recommended together. And again, back to what we talked about, it's a $500,000 project. It is a huge project for this organization. I understand your concern.
But as most, pretty much every graph that I looked at, there's professional fees to everyone.
Well, the professional fees are in 2 locations in our reserve. So in our reserve, we have an association asset reserve, and then we have a water and sewer system asset reserve. Okay, we use professional services for a couple different things now. It used to be just primarily for outside services to analyze a report or a project and put more study into that project. We would use those services for that. So you'd hire an engineer, or another type of specialist for a particular project to determine if that's what you wanted to do. Some other things have changed in our planning and our management team, myself primarily. I do a lot of management of your reserves, as Heather asked so eloquently a long time ago. Managing all of the money for the reserves and the restricted fund, it's a task. And so when we renegotiated my contract, I said, I think you really need to give value for the time we give to taking care of investing the 12 or 13 or 14 or $15 million that you have in reserves here at Woodhaven. So professional services now includes a part of my contract, in addition to all the specialty work that we talked about.
One last item.
Fire away.
Regarding all the computer upgrades, how many old school?
Yep.
and old- Hey,
You look great.
that software.
It's a combination of things, but the technology, has evolved in many ways. So computer operations have gone from just being a laptop or a desktop. It's now all of our phone systems, all of our camera systems, any type of improvement that we make. Now, specific to the upgrades that are taking place, our front gate, which scans all your passes and has things come in, and then our membership database, which includes all your records and your billing and all of that stuff. It's at a point where it's obsolete. And we need to make the upgrade. So that's the biggest project that's going on. But in a number of areas, Dean, IT affects everything we do out here. And unfortunately, you know, from the old school, you could buy something and you might say it's going to last 10 years or 15 years. IT is generally obsolete the minute you install it. And so you got to kind of constantly play catch up with that. But that's what those funds are for. But the biggest part of what we're dealing with right now is upgrading our what we call our Navision software, which includes the membership database, the billing structure, the access to the property, and all of those things need to get upgraded. So that's what's driving those numbers right now.
I guess it's confusing to me because, 35 to 40 years ago, when we started.
Yep.
How the hell did we survive before it fell?
Well, if you remember, you held your pass up and we had a little clipboard and we wrote the pass number down. And the license plate. And we had a pay phone. Yes, you got all that stuff. Times are changing and we're just trying to manage it and keep on.
Just say even you include the sewer and water, it's all.
SCADA system is all controlled by,
Center, all of this.
well, it's all got some type of IT component impact.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Chris.
Can you take just a moment to tell the membership, one of the projects that has been approved is the new change machine for next door. Would you just explain a little bit about that we're exploring the potential for
Sure.
service cards?
Yes. In the project list, we didn't talk about it, but there is a change machine. The current change machine in this facility is no longer functioning and it needs to be upgraded. So that's the first part of this conversation. Something has to be done back there. A proposal's been presented to go to a card-only system, where you would basically be a cashless system. You would put money in a machine and it would issue you a debit card that you could use at all the machines. We're looking at expanding upon that ability throughout the park. We're not obviously going to be able to do it with the money that's set aside in this particular budget. But the advantage of creating what we call a campus card, I think Dana coined the term for me at the facilities meeting, but creating some type of campus card type system. And that's going to play into a lot of layers if we can find a system that works for us. But we have a proposal that will convert this over here. The feedback received from the committees and the board was, well, we don't want to just be able to do it there. We'd like to be able to use it to buy ice cream and to do other things. And so we're looking into that and you know, that may be a project that evolves down the road for us. Any other questions about the budget items? How about online? Sam, is there everybody good? Did you hear everything okay? Were there any questions that you didn't understand?
Everything was great.
could you hear the questions from the audience? Just curious.
Yes, we did, or I did.
They were a little quiet.
Okay. I tried to repeat them. That was the critique I got last year. I didn't repeat the questions enough, so I'll try to get better at that. Thank you guys who are online for participating today. Thank you, everybody who showed up. We appreciate it. We are going to shut this down here shortly. Mary and Diana,
Yes,
we will be sending you a link to jump onto a finance committee meeting here shortly.
okay, no problem. Thank you.
We'll close this out. We'll send you the link so you can hop in. It'll take us probably 5 or 10 minutes to get organized. Dana will be doing the same thing for you with a separate group.
Perfect.
And everybody else, are you good?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, you guys have a great afternoon. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey.